Most people buy an ATEM Mini either for live streaming or as a way to bring multiple camera angles into their video calls. But in today's video, I'm going to show you how the ATEM Mini, along with Blackmagic Cameras and DaVinci Resolve, has completely changed the way I produce my recorded videos, making everything faster and more efficient, and how it can do the same for you. So first up, let's talk about kit, and if you want to find any of this kit, it's linked down in the description below on my kit page. My main camera is the Blackmagic Studio Camera 4K Pro. It is a fantastic piece of kit. I've actually done a review on the camera on my YouTube channel if you want to check out and find out more information about it. Now, plugged into the camera is my Shure MV7 microphone. Rather than recording the microphone audio separately and then having to spend time in the edit afterwards syncing the audio and the video and adjusting and balancing the audio levels, by plugging the microphone into the camera, all of the audio is recorded in sync directly to the camera. And this saves a lot of time. It might sound really simple, but the more that you can get right and implement at the start of your workflows, the easier and less time consuming it then makes the editing process down the road. Now, sometimes I may need a second angle or even a third angle if I'm showing something here on the desk. And for those, I use a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. And the reason I chose those, apart from the fact that I already own them and they're fantastic cameras, is because they actually share the same color science and sensor as the studio camera. So again, that saves me time in the edit, because as long as I set all three cameras with the same settings, when I bring the footage into DaVinci, all the cameras are going to match. I'm not going to have to spend time color matching different angles like I would have to do if I was mixing matching different cameras from different manufacturers, for example. Now, I shoot all my videos in 4K, and these three cameras actually allow me to plug an SSD drive into the side of them and then record at full 4K resolution using Blackmagic's RAW codec. Using SSDs over things like CFast cards or SD cards again saves time because they're much quicker, and also you can store more data on them too. And that means, especially if you're doing long recordings, you can just record everything onto one drive rather than having to keep swapping out cards. Of course, the other reason that I use Blackmagic cameras is because of the way that they integrate with the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. When you connect the camera up to the switcher via HDMI, the camera obviously sends audio and video to the switcher, but the switcher actually sends back to the camera some ancillary data. And it's this two-way connection between the camera and the switcher that actually gives some additional benefits for recording too. So firstly, the ATEM Mini is actually sending timecode data back to each of the Blackmagic cameras, and that data is also being recorded inside the 4K file that the cameras are recording. Now, because all three of my Blackmagic cameras are receiving that identical timecode data, it means that when I come to bring the files into the edit later in DaVinci, it's really easy to sync up all my angles. Secondly, the ATEM can actually control the Blackmagic cameras remotely, which is a huge savior for a one-man band like myself. So when it comes to recording a video, I can sit at the desk and actually just take a glance over at my multi-view screen here and see all of the cameras. And I can check that they all look how they're supposed to, the framing's okay. And if one doesn't look right, I can bring it full screen on my monitor here. I can even, let's say it's out of focus, I can go into the ATEM software control and remotely trigger the autofocus or even manually focus the camera. It's a huge time saver. Without it, for example, I'd have to get up from behind my desk, go around to the camera, manually adjust the focus, come back, check if it's in focus, and then probably do that 2, maybe 3 more times before it's actually right. And let's not forget, I've actually got the option to trigger the camera's recording via the ATEM. All you need to do is go into the ATEM software control and make sure you've got a tick next to the option that says record in all cameras. Then when you hit the record button on the ATEM, it will also trigger the camera recordings too. Now, of course, there are going to be some times where I need to record a non-Blackmagic device. Say, for example, I'm recording a tutorial video. I need to be able to record my Mac screen. So for that, it's pretty simple. I just come out of my MacBook and go into my ATEM Mini via HDMI. And I do the same thing for my top-down overhead shot here, which is using a Sony a6300. I just go in to one of the HDMI inputs on the ATEM Mini. Because I have the ISO version of the ATEM Mini Extreme, I just have to then hit record on the ATEM Mini, and I get a full 1080p recording of all of those devices. I don't need things like the overhead shot to be 4K because I very rarely use them. The last thing I do is actually enable my main camera's audio in the ATEM software control, and this means that the audio from my microphone is automatically embedded into all of the ISO recordings. And this gives me a backup way to sync so that I can sync via audio if I don't want to sync using timecode. But also I've just found it useful when scrubbing through the different ISO files to be able to hear my voice on top of them for if I'm just watching, let's say, a screen recording. So that's the general setup. Let's talk now about my recording process. You've already heard me mention the ATEM Mini a lot in this video, so you may think that as I'm recording my video, I'm also cutting between the cameras live, essentially editing the video as I'm recording. I'm not. You could absolutely do that or have someone off to the side out of shot cutting between the different angles for you. And that's one way to speed up your workflow even further. However, for me, I'm too much of a control freak. I much prefer to just hit record on the ATEM and then leave it knowing that it's taking care of all the recordings, which lets me concentrate on the words that I need to say. And then I can import all of those recordings into DaVinci afterwards and do the edit later. Secondly, one thing that I found really helps me is to actually split up my recordings into sections and then change the recording name in the ATEM software control as I start each new section. That really helps to keep things organized, especially later on when you're trying to find clips in DaVinci Resolve. So for example, I might label the first section as intro and then go on to record my intro. And I try to do everything in one take. I'm definitely not always a one take wonder. So if I do make a mistake, I'll just pause for a few seconds and then go again, rather than stopping the recording, because that generates loads of little files and that will just make your life a nightmare when it comes to finding the right one. It's much easier to just keep all the recording in one section as one file, and then when you come to open that up in DaVinci, it's really easy to just scrub to the right parts. The other thing that makes it a lot easier, and this is my third top tip, timecode notes. The ATEM is actually recording time of day timecode to all of your shots. So one thing that I actually do while I'm recording is just note down whether something was a good take or a bad take. Then when it comes to the edit, you can actually use your notes to quickly skip to the good takes and clip those parts out without having to go through all of the footage. To see the timecode, you need to open up the ATEM software control, go to the output tab, and then open up the timecode generator. And that's the timecode that's being sent to all of your cameras. Then just grab a notepad or open up a spreadsheet. And each time you want to make a note down the time shown in the timecode generator and then put your note next to it. I've actually taken this a step further with my Stream Deck and Google Sheets. So when I hit the good take button on my Stream Deck, it automatically grabs the exact time code, puts it in Google Sheets, and then puts a good take note next to it. It does the same for the bad take button and the cut that button. I then display this Google Sheet on my monitor next to me while I'm editing, and I can't tell you how useful it is to have. And this is something I'd love to see Blackmagic implement natively into the ATEM software control. You could have a button that you push, which then automatically adds a marker to the DaVinci timeline that the ATEM is recording. It would be brilliant. That's the recording process done. But before we go into the editing, I do just want to touch on the offloading of the footage, storing it, and organizing it. As I mentioned before, I do recommend using SSDs for things like the ATEM Mini and the Blackmagic cameras, because SSDs are much faster than things like SD cards or mechanical hard drives, so it's going to speed up the offloading process of your footage. In fact, before I got my NAS, I would actually take the SSD from my ATEM Mini and plug it into my MacBook Pro and edit directly off of the SSD without offloading any of the footage onto my MacBook. And you can do that because SSDs these days are fast enough. Now though, since getting my NAS, I actually take all my SSDs, offload all of the footage onto the NAS, and then edit directly off of the NAS. If you don't know what a NAS is, I do have a video on my channel explaining what they are and how they can be beneficial for video workflows, so you can check that out after this video. But wherever you end up storing your files, it's really important to have an organized file system, and one that makes logical sense, not just to yourself, but to others too, because you never know when you might need to hand off an edit to an external editor. So I'm going to show you how I structure my editing folders. And I'm not saying you should go away and do a carbon copy, but I'm hoping that it inspires you to do something similar. So first of all, I create one folder which has the whole project name, and inside that folder is a number of subfolders. The first one I create is my rushes or my raw media folder. And this is where I put all of the original media from all of the cameras, the ATEM ISO. So you'll see in here, I've got a folder called Cam A, Cam B, Cam C, and those are my Blackmagic cameras, and they've got the Blackmagic RAW recordings in. I've also got an ATEM folder which has the ATEM ISO files in, and any other cameras or media like the overhead camera or screen recordings go into this rushes folder as well. If we go back, some of the other folders that I create are things like sounds for any sound effects or voiceovers, or even music beds go into this folder. You've also got an exports folder. So as I'm working on the timeline, if I want to do an export to show someone, that goes into this folder. Other things like images, any images that I want to put onto the timeline go in there. And also thumbnails, because I've got to create thumbnails for the YouTube video. Everything should have its own logical place within the project folder. Now with all the organization done, we can actually get into DaVinci and talk about the editing side of things. But before we do that, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. With topics like film and video, graphic design, illustration, photography, marketing, and many more, it's an amazing way to get started learning something new or grow your skills by learning from experts. So if you're looking to learn about animation, for example, then Jake Bartlett's Animating with Ease in After Effects course is the one for you. Or maybe you want to up your YouTube game. If so, definitely check out Marques Brownlee's YouTube Success class. I'm taking it at the moment and have found it so useful when it comes to writing my scripts and planning out my videos. And I know many of you who watch my videos for Blackmagic stuff are looking to learn more about DaVinci Resolve. Well, Skillshare has a number of classes for both color grading and editing that are perfect for beginners. Like this DaVinci 17 course from Mustafa Nassar. He's created short but detailed videos explaining each section of DaVinci and all of the effects and functions built into it. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning, meaning there's no ads and they're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And because I've teamed up with Skillshare on this video, the first 1,000 people who use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium so you can explore your creativity. Onto the editing then. Now I like to start with a completely fresh DaVinci project. You could open up the DaVinci project that the ATEM ISO creates, do your edit in that, and then before you export it, add your Blackmagic RAW footage to the B-RAW folder. If you click this button, it will actually swap out the ATEM's 1080p footage for the camera's 4K footage. However, I don't do this because where I split up my recordings into sections, each time you start a new recording on the ATEM with a new name, it generates a new folder with a new DaVinci file. So personally, I prefer to just start with a completely fresh DaVinci project and then import just the media I need into it. With a new project open, the first thing I do is go into the project settings and set my timeline and frame rate. Now I shoot and upload my videos at 4K 50 frames per second, and I have a fully spec'd out MacBook which handles editing 4K B-RAW footage absolutely fine. But it's worth noting if you're working from an older, less spec'd out machine and having trouble playing back the footage, I'd advise rendering proxies of your media. Now proxies allow you to edit with lower resolution footage, which is easier on your computer, but then export your finished project using the original full resolution footage. You can set the proxy media resolution and the format in the project settings, and I usually recommend setting the resolution to 1/4 and the format to ProRes 422 proxy. Also, make sure on the playback menu you have Use Proxy Media if available ticked and selected. Once the settings are set up, I head to the media pool to import my clips. Now I personally like to work section by section, which is where breaking up the recordings in the ATEM really helps. I also only import the clips I need as and when I need them, and that way I'm not filling up the media pool with clips that I might not even use. To start with, I like to just work with my main camera first and actually concentrate on locking in the story and the wording. And then once I have that all right, then I can actually add in all the extras like cutaway shots, sound effects, and titles afterwards. So I'm going to find my intro recording on the A camera here and drag that into the media pool. If you need to create proxies for a clip, you can right click on it and then select Generate Proxy Media. It will take a few minutes to render, but it will make your editing much faster on lower spec machines. With my media now added to the media pool, now I go over to the cut page, and this is where I'm actually going to go through the recordings using my timecode notes from earlier and pull all of the good takes onto the timeline. You can see the clip's timecode in the bottom right hand corner here, and then I use the wheel on my Blackmagic speed editor to quickly navigate to and select sections of the clip. If I click on the scroll button, I can quickly scroll across the whole clip, and then if I need more precise navigation, I can switch to the jog mode, and DaVinci will give me a more zoomed in view to get an exact precise point. So I use my timecode notes and the wheel to navigate to the start point of a good take. Then I hit the in button on the speed editor, which marks an in point. Then I scroll along to the end of a good take and hit out to mark the out point. Finally, I add that selection to the end of the timeline by pressing the append button. And I repeat that process for all of the good takes across all my recordings to quickly build up my timeline. Once I've got all of the good takes in, that's when I then switch to the edit page to start to refine my edit. I'll usually start by adding 3 additional audio tracks in so that I can organize my audio based on what it is. Track 1 is my camera audio, which I call sync. Track 2 is VO or voiceover. Track 3 is SFX for sound effects. And track 4 is music. Now the reason I do this is because later on in the audio mixer, I can actually use a fader to set the volume of the different sounds. I've also created specific track presets for things like my voice. So I can just apply it to track 1 in general without having to actually go through and apply it to each clip. Doing things this way really helps to speed everything up. So now I can start to go through my timeline and really tighten up the edit points. Again, I like to use my speed editor for that as it makes things a lot faster. So I put the timeline into trim mode by pressing this button or pressing T on my keyboard, and then navigate to the edit point and use the trim out button on the speed editor while rolling the wheel just to trim the edit point slightly off the first clip. Then do the same but with the trim in button for the second clip. This is a really easy way to tidy up my cuts. Now let's say I get to a point where I actually want to bring in my B camera for a second angle. Because everything is timecode synced, I can put my playhead on the point where I want the second angle to start, switch over to the cut page and select the B camera for that clip, and then press F on the keyboard, and that will find the exact frame in that clip. Then I just set my in point and my out point, and I press place on top on the speed editor to add it to the timeline with this beautiful metal jog wheel on the right hand side, and it connects to your Mac or PC. It really is that quick. When I'm doing this with B-roll that I've shot at a later date and I'm not trying to sync by timecode, I tend to just do the same thing but in the edit page. Select the clip, pick the in and the out points, and then place on top. Quick tip here, if you unselect the audio track when you do this, then it will only place the video and not the audio, which is usually what you want for B-roll shots. So hopefully you can see how quick and easy it is to start building up your timeline and adding in different angles and B-roll shots as you're working your way through. And once I've finished with the edit, there's actually a few things I usually do before hitting export. Firstly, I apply an audio preset that I've created for my microphone. You'll actually notice I haven't once touched audio levels, and that's because I don't have to. Everything is set in the camera to be a certain level, and that means the only thing I need to do to my audio is apply my preset before I then export. So I just go up to the Fairlight menu in the audio page, click the presets library, and then filter by global track presets. And you can see I've got presets that I've made for my studio. All I do is select the track I want to apply them to, in my case, my sync track on track 1, and then hit apply. And that's it, audio done. Creating presets is super easy, and it's something I'm actually gonna cover in future videos. So if you do wanna see that, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, turn on the notification bell, because they'll be out soon. It's a similar story with the color grade too. I could just put this video out as it is because the color looks fine, but I do have a generic color grade which I apply to my studio shots. I created and saved it as a power grade in DaVinci. A power grade is basically a preset that is available across all of your DaVinci projects. So I apply that grade to the clips shot in my studio as the lighting never changes there. The great thing about power grades is that if you do need to make small changes, you can because they preserve the node structure and all the settings. So within minutes, I've color graded and audio mixed my timeline without having to spend hours doing it manually. Now it's time to export it in the Deliver tab. First, I give my file a name and set the location to the exports folder I created earlier. For 4K video on YouTube, I'm going to tell you the following settings that have worked best for me personally. Leave format as QuickTime and set the codec to H.265. This might take a bit longer to render, but will be better quality than H.264 and a smaller file size too. For the resolution, make sure it's 3840 by 2160 if you're wanting to export in 4K, and make sure that the frame rate is correct too. I set the quality restrict option to 100,000 kilobits per second and leave everything else the same. Then open the advanced settings and just set the color space tag to Rec 709 and the gamma tag to Rec 709A. Now I will say I'm not 100% sure you need to do those last bits anymore with YouTube, but a while back a few people were having issues with the color not showing properly, and those settings did seem to fix it, so personally I've just made a habit of applying those settings when I export. Once set, press add to render queue and then hit render all on the right hand side. Then make a cup of tea and put your feet up because you're done. I hope it's been useful seeing my workflows and how the use of Blackmagic Cameras and the ATEM Mini, the speed editor with DaVinci Resolve, how with all of those things, I'm able to really quickly and efficiently create my YouTube videos. Now I'm going to be doing some DaVinci Resolve tutorial videos in the next few months. So if you want to learn more about DaVinci Resolve, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss those. If you liked today's video and found it useful, please do give it a thumbs up because that really helps. And if you've got any questions about today's video, put them down in the comments below. I read through all of them and will reply to as many as possible. If you need more specific help for your setup, you can always email me on the email address on screen now and we can set up a one-to-one consulting session. So if you want me to look at your workflows and your setup and make recommendations about how to make them more efficient and faster, we can get that booked in and sorted for you. And once you've done all that, guys, I'll see you on the next video.